News is not always, something bad or something negative. Bad news is always not good news. At least for television, because people are there and our target audience is 8 to 80. That's what we're always told. So we have to cater to everybody. Now, we always, all our news bulletins end with a soft story. It need not be loaded with facts. It need not be event-based. We can always look at something related to culture, to the arts, to anything, but the perspective has to be different. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of soft features which show you something that I'm sure people don't always know about, which does not feature every day in the news. Now, there are a couple of stories. If you have time, we'll show both. One is on the silent film. Now, it died almost 70 years ago. But recently what happened, they were trying to recreate it again with live music. So we went and did a story on that. Yeah, take a look at it. Almost 70 years ago, the world bid goodbye to silent films. The applause may have faded since then, but some interest in these classics have remained. Over the last 2 decades, film archives in Europe have tried to revive silent film. In a similar effort, the National Film Archive of India screened the 1929 Himanshu Rai classic, A Throw of Dice, in the capital. Set to live music, the experience was unique. Even in the earlier days, films were never really silent. Each show was accompanied by live music. But when sound came, silent films lost their popularity among the masses and died out. This shows a rare attempt to recreate the atmosphere of the silent era for moviegoers. The original score of A Throw of Dice is lost, and since the film was an Indo-German co-production, the music has been composed by a group of Indian and German musicians.
The most interesting thing in this case is to make experience with sound, with the pure sounds of the instruments, with the harmonic sounds, not for us not so well-known melodies or musical styles, so that the music can be open and flexible to the other parts which the Indian colleagues has prepared.
The original music score was based on Marathi Natya Sangeet, and the Indian group have used it again to give a flavor of the old music.
When you see the old kind of thing, it must match with the melody also of really traditional ways.
The archive is now planning to hold such shows twice a year, and once that happens, silent films may not remain part of a dead history. Meena Chaudhary in Delhi for Newsa.
Okay, Noah, that was the action, disaster, and news feature and soft stories.
Okay.
We'll now get on to Muthu's presentation, and after that we'll field the questions. So, Muthu, would you like to make your presentation, please?
I'll start with radio news. The news format of radio in India is pretty formal and rigid. That is, you have a bulletin that is prepared and a newsreader reading it, one single newsreader reading it for about 10-15 minutes, period. Well, effectively, that is one of the ways to put off a listener. You have to have variety. Well, some people argue that BBC and VOA World Service have more or less a similar format. But the reason why they have that format is because they have a varied world audience, and they're not an audience who are not very familiar with the language. So it's normally read at a slightly slower pace, and this sound bites and other things are not there, special effects are not there in their news bulletin. And I mean, there are different ways of making a news bulletin more interesting, because obviously you're putting out a bulletin so that people will listen to it. You're not putting out a bulletin just for the sake of putting out a news bulletin. Well, basically the principles of advertising apply to all communication. IDA, attention, interest, desire, action. Well, action in this case is to continue listening to your bulletin, or to listen to your bulletin every day, or look forward to your bulletin the next day or the next hour. And I think I'll start with writing. Basically, some of the points, there is a difference between the print medium and the electronic and broadcast media, especially radio and TV. And so there are certain basics which have to be followed, because radio and TV are what one would call focus on immediacy. You have hourly bulletins, or your news shows in the evening itself. It doesn't wait for the next day. You don't have that extra 12 hours to work your story. And so normally the things are, when you're writing, the basic things, when you have to watch your word, and you have to use the present tense. The graphics is there. You have to use the present tense or the present perfect. For example, Parliament has voted for electoral reforms, or something to that effect. Or the Prime Minister says, or Congress President Sitaram Kesari says. Well, if you have to, due to the time lag, if it's a morning bulletin, you've started with that, using that same story, saying says, probably by the evening you might say, said or has said. Avoid cliches. That, of course, it applies to the print medium as well. Well, I think even some of us who worked for quite some time do sometimes fall into that trap. Cliches, well, that's under the time pressure, it's easier, we seek the easiest way out. The adjectives, well, stay away from them as far as possible. And when in doubt, just strike the adjective out. Don't use it. And again, since it is unlike a paper, radio or television news, it's one time, you see it and then it's over. So within that period, you will have to try and get your story across as clearly as possible. So in which case, you try and see that your verb is as close to the subject as possible. I mean, this sounds like kindergarten in school, but these are some of the things we normally tend to forget and end up conveying the wrong meaning or confusing the listener or viewer. And apart from this, there are some other basics for broadcast writing, scripting. In the press, in the print, you have the attribution at the end, or that is the normal. India says it will use its nuclear power only for peaceful purposes, said the Prime Minister, something to that effect. But in broadcast, it is always the attribution first. That's because it's easier when you're listening to get, to relate straight with who said it. That should be first, and then whatever he said. Similarly, well, something, I don't know, probably someone might have thought about it, or you might have been told about it, but have any of you thought the quotation marks that you have in print, well, what does one do in the broadcast media? Well, there are certain matters that may not be perfect. Then you use certain phrases like, in his words, as he put it, what he called, something like. These are things which are something like your quotation marks in the press. And of course, the other thing is that if you really have the quotation itself, the sound bite of the person, whoever is speaking, it is ideal to use that. And the radio bulletins, after having said this, I'll just come on to how radio bulletins could be made more interesting. But it will be, first you have your correspondence reports, like you've seen on television. Actuality inserts, that is either the sound bites of the news maker or some natural sound, and some phone-ins. You might have a live interview. But unfortunately, somewhere radio in India, we still have not got into using these techniques. And abroad, television has evolved from these radio techniques. And, of course, gone on to other things like telecast. But if you'd just like to have a brief idea about how a radio program with these inserts would sound like, you can just listen to the tape.
The News Services Division of All India Radio presents 1990, a look back.
An eventful year, 1990, the spring of a new decade, bearing with it the seeds of both a warm, creative summer and a cold, desolate winter. The Gulf crisis, and at home, the problems of Ayodhya and terrorism, grim reminders that the final frontier, suspicion, is not fully overcome. There was hope as well. The two Germanys uniting and Europe closing ranks. South Africa moving towards a free multiracial society and Indian democracy staying its course. On the whole, the beginning of a challenging new age.
Yes, new challenges, new opportunities, and Mr. Chandrasekhar was Prime Minister, grappling with the grave problems facing the country.
I hope and trust that religious leaders of Muslim and Hindu communities will come to some understanding. Everybody wants that Ram temple should be constructed in Ayodhya, but not by demolishing the mosque. This can be done only by mutual understanding.
The problems in the background as the year began came alive, leading to the BJP withdrawing its support to the minority VP Singh government.
Bharatiya Janata Party, in pursuance of that resolution, hereby withdraws support from Mr. VP Singh's government.
Mr. VP Singh failed the November 7 confidence vote, and dreams broken, the National Front government was out after just 11 months in office. The Congress I, the largest party in Parliament, waiting in the wings since the 89 vote, moved center stage.
So today you're voting with the BJP or against Congress will have nothing to do with such parties, which are communist parties.
Saying he had no mandate, Rajiv Gandhi turned kingmaker and backed Chandrasekhar's new party of 60 breakaway MPs, the Janata Dal S, and the parent Dal cried foul.
Now, by some manipulation, some group is formed which has no validity or sanction of the people.
That just gives you a brief idea. I mean, if you had a daily bulletin that way, I suppose more people would listen to it. It would be more interesting than just having it, in the form that we have it right now. Basically, I mean, this is how most of the stations abroad, local stations, where radio is very popular, have their news done. With sound bites, of course, correspondence reports, live interviews, and other things, making it more interesting. And now just coming over to some of the problems that one faces in the newsroom. At times, you have, you more or less, very clearly know that you have, a certain event, a certain thing has happened, but no one is confirming it. But everyone does say, the people you talk to, your journalist colleagues you talk to, they say, yeah, it's done. You're just telling, okay, who said so? Well, there's nothing like that. A classic example is the election of Mr. Gujral as leader of the United Front. Well, I think all of them would know it. By, I think, around 5 or 6 in the evening, everyone, and there was a buzz saying that the UF has selected Gujral. Try as we might, we didn't have any leader of the United Front saying so. We just didn't have anyone saying so. And the only thing, I mean, we know something. We wanted to get it across to the viewer, but at the same time, well, probably in a situation where it was not facing certain conditions that are prevailing in Doordarshan, probably you could have had a correspondent just say that this is it. But then that correspondent will put his neck out in case it turned out to be somebody else. So I mean, that situation, how we try to somehow get it across.
Reaches a consensus on its new leader. I.K. Gujral invited to steering committee meeting. Announcement likely in a short while after the steering committee formalizes the consensus. BJP demands dissolution of the Lok Sabha and fresh elections. Here is a flash. The External Affairs Minister, Mr. Inder Kumar Gujral, is to be the new Prime Minister of India. The United Front leaders finally put an end to nearly 3 weeks of uncertainty by unanimously choosing Mr. I.K. Gujral as the leader.
Okay. I mean, that's just one example. I mean, we can't go on air saying that, you know, they've decided, because there's no one willing to be on record saying, yes, it is so.
So, Muthu, it's hard to get on the official channels the kind of confirmations that you're looking for, even though you are governmental. It seems a bit strange that the governmental channels are also not able to get it. We have a first question from Chennai Regional Center from Nirja Prabhakar. She wants to know, we get to see stories and features on television with cameras, pictures taken from hidden cameras. How ethical is this from journalistic point of view? I think perhaps the first question should be addressed to Mawla, because you showed the little bit of the darkness in Haryana, and I think that's probably what inspired it.
Now, we did not use a hidden camera at all. We were right there with the camera. I suppose a lot of them were too drunk to notice that we were shooting them. But it's a question that the world over, it's not been answered. You have to, as a journalist, you must know where to draw the line. Now, if you really shoot someone's personal problems, then that is not journalism. But then again, when you have areas where people are doing unethical things, like, for instance, I'll give you a case where doctors they were quacks. They had put up a board saying that these were abortion clinics, and they were carrying out clandestinely several abortions. Now, endangering not only the baby, but also the mother's health. Now, in a situation like this, how do you prove something like this is going on? You can't say it, because, as you know, without pictures, there's no story. So in a situation like this, keeping in mind that you have to get a story, you go in and you use a hidden camera, if you can, because I can tell you from personal experience, hidden cameras are the most difficult thing to handle. There is nothing called a hidden camera. You have 3-4 pieces of it, and you go in there, you have bulky sort of bags. It doesn't work. You can station yourself outside, but you can't really do it inside. You can barge your way in and shoot. You're perfectly within rights to do something like that. So, but you can't obviously get into someone's personal life. You can't air personal domestic disputes, for instance, unless and until it's really affecting a great deal of people.
I'm slightly disagreeing with you. You can invade someone's privacy if the end result justifies the means used, but if the end result doesn't, and you don't know the end result, you can be in serious trouble. Let me give you an example. Were you to be filming in the home of the Haryana Chief Minister, say in his bedroom, without him being aware of it, and all you ended up doing was to film a conjugal scene, you have invaded his privacy utterly and totally unjustifiably. But were you to film him having a whiskey, and he's the Chief Minister who imposed prohibition, the end result would have justified the means. You would have exposed him for hypocrisy, for double standards. You would, in fact, have undermined one of the principal planks of his government, which is prohibition. But you don't know what the end result will be when you begin. You therefore have to ask yourself, do I have reasonable grounds to believe that the invasion is justified because I anticipate in advance success? And that success is an expose of a type such as this, which again justifies the invasion. You therefore have to do what I would call a leap of faith based upon your confidence in the end result and your cross-examination of yourself in consultation with your editor or whoever to clarify that the moral dilemma is known. And then you must reveal to the audience in the reporting that you did this, that there was a very substantial element of subterfuge. You can't hide that. It's pretty close to the paparazzi, by the way. There are no cameras there, but it's the same intrusion of privacy. And there, if I can just finish this, there you justify it on the grounds that it serves. In other words, we justify, by buying the papers, their intrusion into Diana's privacy.
Well, investigative journalism is one thing, and using a candid camera is another. Well, I don't think it's been done in as a regular news reporting technique. And given the laws, I don't think it would ever be.
Paula, what would you like to say? Actually, sorry, but we do use candid camera techniques because there are many areas you just can't sort of walk in and secondly shoot over. You can't. Like he says, that we're too bound by laws, and everybody, in India, we tend to worship the individual. If he has power, then he is immediately assumed that he can do no wrong. So, and he has a final word on anything. Now, if you have to break out of that, you have to use candid camera techniques. I think it's also very similar. If you're staking out somebody, you're waiting for hours on end. Let's say from Naveen, let's say he's staying in some house in Bombay and he's holed up there. And you don't know whether he's really the culprit. It's still not been, it's not been proved. But you assume that he's a culprit because the Bombay police has said he is involved. So you stake out, so that's also candid camera. He doesn't know that when he comes out that you're actually shooting him. And then you show that he's in Bombay, while let's say the reports are saying he's in London. So that's also the same candid camera. So like I said, privacy again, that's where we tend to sort of hesitate. But otherwise, when we're dealing with all sorts of issues, we do the candid camera and staking out and sit around for hours on end trying to get what you're looking for. We do. I mean, in this Haryana thing, Karim was talking about, we were doing exactly that. None of them knew. I mean, that's candid camera. You hear the moment you have this guy coming out of some ditch because he's drunk. So,
okay, to get the story, you have to use all sorts of techniques, but I think I would tend to agree with the idea that the end certainly justifies the means in getting to the story. You get the story, then you can take your editorial decision as to whether it should be used or should be held back. I think all of us have had stories that we've held back simply because they possibly would be too damaging or there are problems. The governmental media tends to hold back much more than to give out. If there are any questions from the floor, we'd be very happy to field any questions from the thing. Okay.
From what has been said, we know that everybody wants to get what the people want to know, right? You want to, you always try to, interviewers always try to interrogate, or interrogation, I want to use the word later, because that is one thing, when you're interviewing or reporting, you always tend to lead the person to what you want to hear. Now, how far can you remain your objectivity practically? How do you maintain that?
Karan, I'd like you to take that one.
Well, we'll begin first of all with my favorite reply to people who accuse interviewers of asking leading questions. And that is to say to them, what's wrong with a leading question? Would you prefer a misleading one? I mean, the whole object of the exercise is to ask a question that gets the sort of answer you think is the right answer. Unless if it's a completely open question, you run the risk of going on a fishing expedition. Sometimes that's a very worthwhile thing to do, but then it's not really an interview that you're doing within a confined space and time. You're simply asking questions because you're not sure what the answer is. You're going to cut them all away, you're going to edit it and put it together in the light of the end result. That's a different exercise. To come back to what I suspect is the broader point that you are making, I would say there are, broadly speaking, two types of interviews. This applies more to the sort of interviews that you'd see as interview programs rather than sound bites that appear in the middle of news, because there you have a very clear purpose. But if you think about half-hour interviews or whatever that you see on TV, broadly there are two types: those that shed light on an issue or those that generate heat. Let me explain what I mean. If you are the Minister of Energy and you decide that you want to talk to him about India's energy policy, and you want to discuss with him the fact that we are running out of fossil fuels and what sort of steps are being taken to go into thermonuclear fuels and what are the costs and environmental pollution costs and a whole lot of other things, and you're desperately interested in the subject, then you seek to do an interview that sheds light on all the complexities and intricacies of India's future energy policy and its impact on the economy and development and pollution, and you end up with something that is fascinating to those who care about energy policy, and that's 5% of the country, at best, right? But it's extremely worthwhile of his time because you have the man responsible and you're getting from him something that is only he can give you. On the other hand, you do an interview which generates heat. You take, for instance, Mr. VP Singh, the Prime Minister, Chandrasekhar, anyone who's in a position of authority, and you say to yourself, I have an audience whose attention time span is less than 3 minutes, and their general knowledge is even less than that. And their ability to absorb matters of detail, leave aside complicated matters of detail, is minimal. That's true of most television audiences. They watch TV for entertainment. They've got 6 other channels they can switch to at the flick of a remote control. I want to retain their interest. So, I'm going to stage a tamasha. You create a spectacle, right? You begin by hitting your interviewee straight on the head. You make him incredibly defensive. Anyone hit on the head becomes defensive. He gives you absolutely nothing of any value on any subject, but you have one hell of a ding-dong that's great fun to watch. You've generated a lot of heat. Most people sit gripped by that interview over there, right? Because there are two people trading insults, very politely, and there are fireworks going on all over. Absolutely nothing of any value on any subject would have emerged, but you will have been highly entertained. Those are the two extremes. Okay. Most interviews try and find some sort of happy line through them. Whether you become an interrogation at that end, or whether at this end you say, this is a boring interview, yeah, one karo. You have the end, right? You have to judge. Are you shedding light? Are you generating heat? You're trying to do both together, which sometimes is difficult.
Okay, we have about a minute, so the last question from the floor. One more question from the floor, and we will wind up here.
I would like to ask Arun Thapar. He said that as far as the hidden camera is concerned, the ends justify the means. As far as the end is, when the end is result is good, the means is okay. So how would everybody would find a justification for their cause, you know, whether it is a good issue or a bad issue.
Okay,
so
let's take that.
draw the line.
3 sentences.
First of all, ensuring that the end is the one you want is not by any means a guarantee that you can ever claim to. It's very difficult. Secondly, you have to agonize over whether your ability to get it is going to lead to some success. So the first stage is you really introspect and ask yourself, will I get it? If I don't, I've just invaded someone's privacy with no justification. I'm then left with egg on my face. I have a reputation to maintain, my organization has a reputation to maintain. Is it worth the risk? Then, when you undertake the risk, there's no guarantee it's going to actually lead to the result. You could still end up. You may be able to say, look, I'm all still not use it, but I still can't use it. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do.
Okay, that's an agonizing question, and we thank you for your participation. All of you who were with us, we certainly enjoyed the session from each one of us, and thank you very much.
Thank you.